Gates can wreck your mix, but avoiding them keeps you from mixing your best. There's more than just a threshold control on a noise gate, and getting to grips with the more advanced controls can help you take your mix to the next level. It takes confidence and experience to quickly dial in a gate properly, so I'm here to lend you my experience to give you the confidence to get that gate sounding great. We'll look at 5 ways that you can go beyond simply turning on and lowering the threshold. And if you're looking for help with EQ, then you can check out my free guide, 3 Steps to Perfect EQ, in the description below. Let's dive in. Tip number 1 is to use the sidechain feature on your gate. Usually a gate listens to the channel that it's activated on, right? If you have it on a snare drum, then it's listening to the microphone on the snare drum, and when it hears the impact of that snare drum, opens the gate and the sound comes through. And when it doesn't hear the sound of the snare drum, the gate is closed, and so you don't hear that microphone bleed into your mix. What a sidechain does is it looks to some other sound source to open the gate for that channel. Now, this is sometimes called a key input because key opens the gate, right? But it doesn't have to listen specifically to another channel. It can listen to the same channel on a very specific frequency range. You could, for example, put a gate on your kick drum and then turn the sidechain filter on and set it to only listen to frequencies below 100 Hz. It would only hear the low rumble sounds of the kick drum and know this is when I open the gate. And things like the higher pitch of the snare drum or of the cymbals or any other instruments on the stage would be less likely to open that gate. And it just makes it a little easier to dial the threshold in properly so that you're only letting that gate open when the correct instrument sounds. And this is a really, really valuable technique for getting clean sound on instruments with lots of noise around about them, like snare drums, toms, and kick drums. Beyond that, you could also use the sidechain to simply listen to another channel. For example, you might have a microphone inside the kick drum and a microphone outside the kick drum. Why not tell the gate on the microphone outside of the kick to listen to the microphone inside the kick drum? Because there will be less spill coming into that microphone because it's inside the drum and closer to the sound source. That way, you'll get a far more even opening and closing of the gate on your microphone outside of the kick drum. Tip number 2 is a little obvious, but it's to use the hold control. So let's say you have a really poorly tuned drum kit or a drum kit with really sloppy heads on it. And generally, when someone plays that drum kit, it's sounding not too hot. There's no impact, there's no snap. You can actually use a gate to add in additional sort of snap and create a false decay on that drum kit. We mess about with the release and the hold times. The hold control lets you tell the gate how long to let that sound play out. So if your drum is ringing on for an eternity because it's poorly tuned, it has too long a decay, and that's not what you want, you can set the hold control to half a second, and then your drum will only ring out for half a second before it tapers off and the gate is closed. You can use this in conjunction with the release time to create the sort of decay sound that you want so that you can fully resculpt the sound of that drum to give impact and punch in a mix where it would otherwise be sort of flat, lifeless, and probably full of feedback and rumbling. Having a properly tuned drum kit is far preferable to doing this, so if you have time, get that drum kit tuned. Tip number 3 goes along with this tip, and that is to pay more attention to attack and release times. I personally always go for a really super fast attack time on the gate. I want the gate to open as soon as I hear that sound. I don't want any kind of delay happening. I like to dial in the release time gradually and find that sweet spot where the sound decays naturally after the gate has turned off. If you set your attack time too slow, or you make your release time too fast, then you might find that bits of the sound are being unnaturally cut off. And this can actually create a kind of glitchy, weird clicking sound when the gate opens and closes. So if you start hearing a clicking sound when you're dialing in a gate, or just when you hear a drummer playing, think that it might actually be the attack and release times that you need to change, not the threshold. So if it's a drummer, have them play, set that attack as fast as it'll go, and then just make that release time longer and longer until it starts sounding natural. Tip number 4 is sort of a general list of when to use gates and when not to use gates, because sometimes you shouldn't use them. I recommend using a gate on just about every single drum that you've got because it helps beat low end feedback and it also lets you tame any long ringing sounds like we talked about earlier. Beyond that though, I would really recommend against using a gate on something like overheads or cymbals, just because I find that they don't have this natural transient that's very easy to control using a gate. It's also recommended to not use a gate when you're working with stringed instruments like violins or cellos. And I'd also suggest not using a gate when you're working with jazz. Or if you are using a gate on jazz, make sure that it is very, very gentle. On things like snare drum, there's quite a lot of ghost notes, and the dynamics in jazz, so how loud it gets and how quiet it gets, varies so much that you can't really predict it accurately and thus can't set your gate accurately. But something that you should try on actually is vocals. And that brings us to tip number 5, which is use an expander or a gate with a range control on your vocals. So an expander is like a reverse compressor. When the sound crosses the threshold, instead of being turned down slightly, it is turned up slightly. And expanders are often found on gates. You just need to look for some sort of dial or button that lets you change the mode of the gate. Alternatively, you can dial in the range control of the gate to simulate an expander. The range control just dictates how low a sound is turned when the gate is closed. So you might think of a gate as being on and off, but it doesn't need to be. It might be half volume versus full volume. And using expanders or gates on vocals helps you really reduce bleed from drum microphones and other instruments on the stage, while turning your vocal up quite loud, getting a nice clean sound that you can work with in a busy show. There was a lot about drums in this video, so I'll leave a link here to a video all about mixing live drums. And if this was useful, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.